There's a quiet ache carried by those who dwell beneath the surface, a pain so subtle it never demands attention, yet presses relentlessly on the heart. It is the burden of seeing more than what's shown, of sensing the truths that others evade, of feeling the shadows they'd rather ignore. Imagine yourself at a bustling dinner party. Laughter ricochets around the table. Idle chatter swirls like warm air. Someone marvels at the sunshine. Another spills the latest gossip. The mood floats, buoyant and shallow. Then you speak. You offer a word that cuts through the pretense, an observation that carries weight, honesty, maybe even a flicker of discomfort. The laughter dies. The flow falters. Forks pause midair, throats clear awkwardly, and the moment evaporates into silence. That hush, that slight distancing, whispers that your truth didn't belong. Carl Jung knew this too well. He warned that diving deep into one's own psyche sets you adrift from the superficial rhythms of society. Not because there's something wrong with you, but because the world celebrates illusion over authenticity. Conformity is comfortable, rewarded by polite smiles and nodding heads. Realness, however, is jarring. It reveals cracks in the facade, and most people prefer the safety of unexamined routines. When you question traditions or scan beyond hollow customs, you become the anomaly. Jung once reflected that intelligence and self-awareness often amplify one's suffering in a culture asleep to its own depths. It's not praise, it's a cautionary tale. From childhood, the seeds of this isolation are sown. A deep thinker emerges early, a child who puzzles over why white lies are easier to tell than truths, who wonders why rules shift without reason, who senses that love can be conditional. They ask questions that unsettle the grown-ups who answer with, "Don't ask so many questions," or "Why can't you be like everyone else?" Pressed into silence, they learn to swallow their curiosities, though the inquiries never soften. Each question becomes sharper, each insight heavier until an inner world unfurls, populated by unspoken reflections, hidden sorrows, uncharted yearnings. Adulthood doesn't change the tune. At work, you're handed a script to recite. In relationships, you're cautioned against your own intensity. On social media, you're nudged toward positivity, toward trimming away complexity until your words feel hollow even to you. It's a survival tactic, not a desire. Society, Jung argued, fears what it fails to grasp. When you propose deep ideas, people assume you're showing off. When you hold silence, they suspect judgment. When you share wounds, they brand you dramatic. Yet, you're neither arrogant nor theatrical. You're simply alive to dimensions they can't bear to visit. You shed light on truths they've buried, remind them of long-buried pain. And that reminder sears. That tension is the hallmark of a deep thinker's experience, the honor of witnessing hidden realities, and the heartbreak of being met with resistance, ridicule, or retreat. You offer a warning, a lens, a different path, and instead of gratitude, you're met with cold shoulders or hurried exits. You're branded negative for speaking what others silently dread. Authenticity doesn't thrive in anxious minds. It unsettles. Because thinking, true thinking, demands work. It wrestles with contradictions, refuses tidy resolutions, digs beneath preconceptions, and demands reckoning. Where most shuffle through life rearranging familiar beliefs, you dismantle them, layer by layer. You bear the weight of questions others casually discard. And that relentless probing comes at a cost. You lose the affectionate nods of the superficial world. With each awakening, the distance grows. Not out of malice, but because everyone else is cocooned in comfortable illusions. Still, you search for connection. You soften your edges, dial down your insight, reframe your words to land softly. But truth vibrates on its own frequency, and once you hum at that pitch, you can't return to static harmony. So, where does that leave you? flung between silent rejection and the knowledge that conformity would betray your soul? It's why so many deep thinkers feel like exiles in broad daylight, never broken, only misaligned with the prevailing tides. Jung coined the phrase mass-mindedness to capture how the collective mind drifts on autopilot, swallowing handed-down scripts without testing their authenticity. From cradle to career, we're fed a playbook: what success looks like, what failure means, what shapes our desires. Obey this and you're praised. Question it and you're ostracized. Education, often the first crucible, rewards rote answers over curiosity, stillness over stirring, memorizing over musing. Rows of chairs, bells dictating your voice, red pens penalizing wonder. There's no room for uncharted thought in a system designed for uniformity. Jung believed such structures are born of fear. Fear of truth, fear of solitude, fear of the human spirit unshackled. Yet deep thinkers don't merely crave silence, they create it. Within that hallowed space, the world around them writhes uncomfortably because it's never been taught to sit with itself. When you walk into a room and carry an intensity that looks like calm, people feel exposed. Your gaze doesn't stop at facades. It sees the tremors beneath the smile. And being seen in that raw form feels like falling through thin ice. They might label you weird or loner, but it's not your strangeness, it's their discomfort. Jung reminded us that genuine loneliness springs not from being alone, but from being unheard. You might yearn to unpack meaning, to discuss purpose, to peel back the layers of existence, and each time you're met with feigned interest or abrupt changes of subject, the ache deepens. Survival in an indifferent world demands camouflage. You learn to mute your hunger for depth so you can breathe among the surface dwellers. But every time you dim your light, a fragment of yourself is sacrificed, and doubt follows. Perhaps you truly are the problem, too sensitive or too verbose, yet abandoning your insight would be abandoning your soul. Jung believed that the greatest hope for humanity is carried by those brave enough to stay awake in an unconscious society, to sit with discomfort, to ask the hard questions even when no one else will. That's your gift and also your burden. Being a deep thinker isn't comfortable. You can't pretend. You can't shift blame. You can't ignore the hollow rhythms when everything inside you pulses with inquiry. In that sense, feeling becomes rebellion. If you've ever walked into a room and felt the air sharpen before a word is spoken, or left a conversation drained while others emerge refreshed, you know what it means to be the emotional fulcrum for the unprepared. In Jungian terms, the burden of being a receptacle for others' unacknowledged feelings is projection, and for deep thinkers, it becomes a slow erasure of self. You absorb their fears, their resentments, their unvoiced longings. Your own voice, once clear, fades beneath the chorus of borrowed anxieties. And when you finally pull back, boundaries in place, you're branded cold or unkind, even though you're merely tending to your own preservation. This subtle depletion is how society saps depth, not through overt violence, but through emotional extraction. You give insight, calm, and compassion, and rarely receive it in return. When you step away to replenish, they accuse you of selfishness. They don't see that your retreat is necessary fuel for the journey of consciousness you've chosen. Then there's the onslaught of media. Thousands of ads vying for attention, whispering that you're incomplete unless you buy, change, conform. For a deep thinker, every glittering billboard, every crafted post, every sensational headline triggers a cascade of questions about worth, manipulation, authenticity. Scrolling is never passive. Every image is a prompt to peel back the layers and reveal the machinery beneath. And beneath it all is the collective unconscious Jung described, tattered and fear-driven, scrambling to suppress depth. From classrooms to boardrooms, the mantra is clear. Don't slow down. Don't dig deeper. don't feel too much, yet you can't unsee, unfeel, unask. You pause, you reflect, you linger in that space between thought and being, even though the world punishes you for it. In schools, you're marked distracted. At work, philosophical musings earn you labels of impracticality. In relationships, your emotional honesty is dubbed intensity. But you're not inefficient or overdramatic. You're simply real. And in a culture built on performance, reality is the ultimate dissenter. Being this kind of dissenter brings losses. Friendships that fade, opportunities that vanish, invitations that stop arriving. You refuse the script. You refuse the applause for smiling while you ache. It's a radical stance, and radicals pay a price. Yet isolation doesn't have to be loneliness. It can be the sanctuary where you meet yourself. When you see your own heart clearly, you awaken. And in your wakefulness lies the promise of connection with others who vibrate on the same wavelength. When two deep souls finally converge, even if only for a fleeting moment, the world shifts. Illusions crack. Truth sighs into the space. The soul recognizes a kindred presence. There's a crucible moment for every seeker, to shrink back into conformity or to stretch into the bright, uncomfortable unknown. The world will beg you to conform, offering comfort in exchange for silence. It will cheer your numbness and validate your compliance, but you will know in your bones that merely surviving is not enough. Deep thinkers are born with minds that resist taming, hearts that shun numbness, souls that refuse pretense. That is your strength, not your weakness. Jung spoke of a psychological destiny carried within each of us, a task meant to be fulfilled. For the deep, that task is sacred and arduous, to descend into the shadow, to face the fire of the self, to emerge transformed. There is no roadmap, no parade of supporters, no neatly drawn finish line. Some days you'll feel lost. Others you might feel cursed. Yet the emptiness that frightens you is really an empty canvas, ready for something greater. When you cease being the version expected by the crowd, you begin to become who you were meant to be. And that is where true life unfolds. You aren't here to win popularity contests. You're here to awaken the few who yearn for genuine connection, who see meaning in symbols, who ask why before they ask how much. They are scattered across the globe, waiting for a voice brave enough to speak their unspoken truths. But they can only find you when you stop hiding. Let them misunderstand your seriousness, your sensitivity, your intensity. Offer them a gentle smile and dive deeper into your own depth, because the world depends on the rawness of your insight. You don't need trophies or best-selling tomes. Your quiet presence, your refusal to look away, your willingness to stay awake. These are the humble medicines that begin to heal an unconscious society. So claim your own value. Cease asking for permission to be whole. The path of the deep thinker is not about fitting in or placating others. It's about honoring the sacred complexity within you and trusting that in doing so, you light the way for the few who will travel beside you. The world doesn't yet know it needs you, but one day it will. Until then, keep shining your fierce, unedited truth. The journey you've walked isn't a stumble into darkness. It's a passage toward clarity. When every surface relationship felt like running on hollow ground, when every polite nod grated on your spirit, you were forging resilience. In a world that equates calm detachment with strength, your fierce empathy is your true power. You carry within you the capacity to feel the unspoken and to witness the hidden. You are the cartographer of inner territories that most fear to map. There will be moments when the silence around you feels unbearable, when your voice trembles under the strain of knowing what you know. In those moments, remember that the clarity you've gained is a lantern for others. You may speak into the void now, but somewhere, someone is listening. Somewhere, someone's soul has found in your words the permission to shed their mask, to acknowledge the ache they've carried alone. And that ripple matters more than you can measure. Not every heart you touch will return the gift. Some will recoil, some will dismiss you as too heavy, too intense, too unconventional. But that scarcity of receptivity doesn't diminish your worth. It highlights the value of the spaces where you do belong. Seek those spaces. They could appear in a quiet friendship, in a candid comment thread, in the pages of a journal you share with a kindred spirit. They could appear in the art you create, the reflections you write, the questions you voice aloud. Wherever two souls dare to meet beneath their public personas, a new world is born. And sometimes, the deepest refuge will be within yourself. Cultivate rituals that honor your depth. A silent dawn walk where your thoughts can unfurl. A page in a notebook reserved for the questions that shock your mind. A playlist of music that carries chords unsaid. A weekly pause where you simply sit with your breath and the questions that rise. These practices are not indulgences. They are affirmations. I belong to my own story. I own the weight of my own mind. I am my own sanctuary. When you protect that inner sanctum, you'll find the outer distractions lose their grip. The petty dramas, the clamor for likes, the shallow goals that others lifelessly chase. You learn to distinguish between what draws your energy and what drains it. You give time to what resonates with the tremors in your heart, the long conversation about mortality, the art that channels rage into beauty, the shared silence that speaks volumes. And slowly, a community forms, not by accident, but by magnetism. You'll meet another soul who shies away from small talk, who lingers in the spaces where honesty is rare. You'll trade glances that say, I see you, I understand. You'll find that solitude transforms from isolation into chosen company. You'll realize that being misunderstood by the masses doesn't matter when you are understood by a few. Imagine a gathering of these few. Not a crowd, but an intimate constellation of minds. Each brings a different hue. One wrestles with fear, another carries unhealed grief, another is steeped in wonder. But you're all tied by the same thread, the courage to feel deeply. In that circle, you'll discover something extraordinary. Listening is more transformative than speaking. When you share a piece of your heart and someone meets it with their full attention, you both expand in that instant. Those moments are antidotes to the numbness the world prescribes. They remind you that vulnerability is not weakness. It is the most potent form of connection. Your willingness to reveal the fractures in your spirit invites others to do the same. And when broken people gather without shame, beauty emerges from the mosaic of scars. From that place of shared depth, action begins. Not performative gestures or viral campaigns, but small acts of presence. Checking in on the friend who disappears after a crisis, holding space for the sibling who never learned to cry, writing a letter to your younger self to acknowledge the questions unanswered. These acts reverberate. They crack the immune system of the collective unconscious, letting new oxygen in. As a deep thinker, you are uniquely equipped to offer perspective. You know that change doesn't happen at warp speed. You've witnessed how a single thought, tenderly nurtured, can bloom into a movement years later. You've seen how a seed of insight planted in one conversation can take root in countless hearts. So speak your truths, even when the world hushes you. Write your reflections, even if only a few read them. Live your integrity, even if it means walking away from the applause. Along the way, practice kindness toward yourself. Recognize that depth can be draining. Permit yourself rest without guilt. Permit yourself joy that isn't earned by productivity. Permit yourself to marvel at morning light or to laugh at the absurdities of life. Because loving yourself in full measure is the foundation for loving others with open arms. Remember Jung's idea of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole by integrating every part of yourself, light and dark, You, with your questions and your shadows, are on that journey. You won't arrive at a final destination, but that's the point. Wisdom isn't a finite prize. It's a path you embrace with curiosity and compassion. In the tapestry of humanity, your threads are essential. They weave subtle patterns that fortify the whole, even though they remain unseen by indifferent eyes. You might never headline a victory parade, but you carry victories every day. When you resist the urge to shrink yourself, when you hold someone's pain without fixing it, when you honor a truth that society would rather bury. Those quiet triumphs accumulate, like whispered prayers in the vault of existence, until they echo as transformation. Trust in the slow alchemy of your presence. Trust that the questions you raise light beacons for those still lost in the fog. Trust that your refusal to settle for hollow comforts stirs others to question, to feel, to awaken. And above all, trust that your depth is not a burden but a gift, to yourself, to the ones you touch, to the world that, like a patient earth, will one day sprout anew from the seeds you've planted. This path calls you not to endure, but to engage, to honor every pulse of thought, every tremor of feeling, every echo of wonder. When you do, you are no longer an exile, but a pioneer charting the unseen continents of the human soul. And in that frontier, you find your true home,